Ah, yes, better. Yes, better. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm very.
Is it recording?
Yeah, we can edit it, I guess, at the beginning.
Ah, okay.
So great pleasure to introduce Vasilios, who is in fact going to give a talk. He was invited by one of the people he interviewed for his project to come and give a talk on his project at a shipping conference in Greece. So at the end of the month, he will go and give this talk in Greek in Greece. And I thought it would be a good idea to come practice on us and tell us a bit about his work. So Vasilios, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here to talk. It's more of an operational project rather than a deeply technical, as you're most used to, but I'll try to make it as jolly as possible and hopefully you will enjoy it. So basically my title is an empirical investigation on using a 3D visualization of X data for mitigating maritime accidents within restricted waters. Big title, I know. Basically it's my project for my master's degree, and it's actually comprised of many elements that's based on shipping accidents, as well as how information technology has helped mitigate a very prominent issue with shipping, which is accidents. Within restricted waters, and by restricted waters we mean ports, canals, basically self-explained. So,
I have the first question.
yeah.
You say supervised by?
Yeah, I was given the
Johnny Middlesex.
I was given the liberty to use the pseudonym of my supervisor.
Why do you have that particular inclination? You need to ask him. That's a psychological.
I have a slightly more content-based question. What's ECDIS?
It's electronic chart display information system.
Thank you very much.
So, basically, the structure of the presentation is going to be a short introduction about the sea trade, the maritime accidents, prevention measures and information systems, of course, current and prominent research on the field, my own personal research and my findings, and of course a conclusion. So, commercial shipping. It has a 5,000 years of documented history, ranging from the Egyptians to Greeks to Mesopotamians, basically developed and refined within the Mediterranean region. But it wasn't until the last 2 centuries that it has actually played a central role in the globalization of the economy. At this date, it's safe to say that 90% of the global trade is being conducted by sea. So, why it's so attractive? Well, first of all, it's affordable. Shipping has always been the only really cost-effective means of bulk transportation over long distances.
I guess when you say 90%, that's even 90% of the value, because by weight it would be a lot more.
Yeah. So, especially it's ideal for raw material transportation. Basically, material is hard to package, like it's required for inland transportation and logistics. Basically, what the part of logistics science is based upon. Of course, an additional feature is it's environmentally friendly. Based on data from the United Nations Commercial Trade Association Department, sea trade is actually has 4 times less CO2 emissions than commercial trucks and 40 times less CO2 emissions than aviation trade. Some interesting features.
As long as they don't spill.
As long as you don't. Yeah, sorry. This is where those things.
A few thousands of oil in the sea, and nobody claims possibility.
Yeah.
That's usually.
Spoiler alert. Okay, but that's true. But when everything goes well, it's actually the most environmentally friendly mean of transportation. So some interesting numbers here. We can see the international seaboard trade in volume in million metric tons, counted in million metric tons, all from 1980s to 2013. It's not, the numbers are not clearly visible, but I have predicted that. So, quick container shipping, 102 million metric tons on 1980, 1,524 in 2013. Oil and gas, basically tankers, LNG, LPGs, basically liquid natural gas and liquid petroleum gas tankers. Small difference, but still a significant ones. 5 major bulks. This contains the 5 major bulk transfer, which is iron ore, sulfate, phosphorus, grain, and cement. Other dry cargo, basically anything that is not contained in this category. So, in total, we see a triplicization of the actual volume trade from 1980s to the 2013. So, here we can see the top 20 ship-owning nations based on thousands of deadweight tons by country and by economy of ownership. By economy of ownership, we mean the nationality of the owner of the company that's been profiting, that his country has been profiting from. Top 5 ones. First one is Greece with 250,848 deadweight tons and a total fleet of 3,826 ships. We're talking only about commercial vessels, not passenger or recreational vessels. Second is Japan with a slightly larger fleet, but it's comprised of smaller vessels, so hence the difference in the capacity. China with an even bigger fleet, still with smaller vessels. Germany and the Republic of Korea. However, all this increase in numbers has its downsides, and unfortunately, when we're talking about the maritime industry, we're talking about catastrophic downsides. Some prime examples. Exxon Valdez, 1989. It spilled in the Alaska. It grounded. It hit a reef in the Alaskan Gulf due to human errors. Basically, the captain was drunk, based on testimonies and the official reports, and it spilled 41.8 million liters of crude oil in one of the most beautiful areas of the planet, the Alaskan Gulf. 2,008 kilometers of coastline contaminated, and some other grim statistics, and tremendous environmental catastrophe. Also, financial aspects, 4.3 billion US dollars of claim cost compensation and fines for Exxon company. I'm going to make a small interjection here. This cost is a tiny fraction compared to what BP had to pay in the Deep Horizon event. And actually, it's during a latest conference, somebody said that if it is to make environmental catastrophe in the US, make sure it's from a US company.
US company.
It's been mentioned in a US conference from one of the great BP.
That's sour craters.
Yeah.
But BP is half owned by Americans, isn't it? I mean, is it even a majority share?
It's not owned by Britain.
It's certainly not owned by me.
Actually,
I wouldn't be here now.
Actually, this was sent to me by a friend on my way here, so I thought it was interesting to mention that. Coming more to the most recent future, January 13. Hello. Hello. Coming to the most recent future, a very well-known accident, the Costa Concordia. It had a grounding accident, hit a rock outside of Italy, and due to human errors again and weather conditions, and the results were 32 human losses, 17 injured, the ship was lost, and fortunately there was no pollution. So some basic terminology, a marine casualty or an accident, it's basically understood as any event that's connected with the operation of the ships and has to fulfill one of the 5 scenarios, which is basically death, loss of injury of a person, the loss or abandonment of the ship, material damage to the ship and the marine infrastructure, stranding or disabling of the ship, or severe damage or potential damage to the environment due to the ship, brought by the damage of the ship. A marine incident can be understood as any incident that is related to its connection with the operation of the ship, and if it's not being treated, it can actually lead to a marine casualty. And an occurrence is basically a summation of those 2 categories. For the year 2013, only in the European member countries, 5,816 occurrences of accidents have been reported. 3,266 incidents and casualties, which means documented accidents that did happen, 2,550 accidents. So here we can see a progression from 2011, 2012, 2013. Apparently, we're not getting any better as time passes. So, accidents can be separated in the following categories. Any accident outside the 12 nautical mile radius is called an open sea accident. Within that radius is called a coastal water accident. Accidents that happen inside port, canals, archipelago fairways are called internal or restricted waters accidents, are most commonly known, and it's the most common category of accidents. And usually, as other in all statistics, they refer to repair yard accidents or accidents of an unknown cause that has never, basically nobody bothered to actually say why that happened. And here is interesting statistics. As you can see, more than 50% of the total reported occurrences had taken place inside internal water or restricted waters. Hence the interest of this project of mine. So the restricted water accidents can be further categorized in collisions. Basically, one ship crashes into the other. Groundings. And of course, non-impact accidents which are related to the operation of the ship. So bad maintenance causes a leak, and the leak causes a fire. Just a quick reference to what was accident for. The top left one is from 2012 in Syracuse. Top right happened actually in 2012 here in the Thames River in London. And the bottom one is from the Tokyo Bay in 2007. So, because of from the mid of 19th century and onwards, a number of maritime agreements had to be set in order to prevent those kind of accidents. Ever since the infamous Titanic disaster, the first Safety of Life at Sea convention has taken place, or SOLAS, as is widely known. These days, this convention is under the restriction of the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, which is the predominant body for regulating safety at sea. Basically, 2 are the most important convention of the IMO. The Safety of Life at Sea, which covers everything from how the ship needs to be maintained, what procedures should be followed from cargo exchanges, anything related to safety. And the MARPOL, which is sort of maritime pollution, which is related to prevention measures for pollution at sea. IMO issues specific codes, which is basically very strict guidelines that all ship-owning countries need to abide by. And the most famous one is the ISM, You can actually think in something like the ISO, we have here for land, or any other standard measure. And the ISPSS, which has been established after the events in the 9/11 in the US, which basically involves precautionary measures that needs to be taken during port operations to avoid any terrorism attacks or piracy attacks. Other predominant organizations, other prestigious organizations are the European Maritime Agency, established in Lisbon, Portugal, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Association in the US, and the IHO, which is not directly related to safety, but its role is very important because it's the it's the primal body for taking bathymetric measurements, issuing nautical charts, doing research on new technologies, and it's basically keeping in touch with all the hydrographic agencies around the globe. For example, here in the UK, we have the UKHO, the United Kingdom Hydrographic Office. So, safe navigation. 3 questions, ever since man started to travel at sea, 3 questions has been pondering the mariners. Where exactly am I right now? Where do I want to go? How will I go there safely? Various navigation methods have been established through the years and are still used today. First of all, celestial navigation, or commonly known as triangulation. It's basically using fixed positions on the horizon with celestial and cross-matching with celestial bodies to determine your position. Traditional tools that modern version of them are used until this day are the sextant, the gyroscopic compass, almanacs, tables, etc. The radio navigation uses radio waves to determine position through electronic devices. The modern versions of those devices, the VHF, which stands for very high frequency, and the Doppler, which is a sonar type device. The radar navigation uses the radar to determine position through objects which their position is known, basically land masses, but also for target recognition. And when it comes to sweeping, we're talking about ships surrounding the vessel. With the advent of technologies, of satellite technology and the GPS, we now have the satellite navigation. And this is the traditional instrument found on the bridge of the ship, the GPS, and this is the automatic identification system, which basically, it's not very clear, but you can see there's the names of the vessels surrounding the ship and their coordinates and the speed at which they travel. But as you can already see, there is a problem here. First problem is fragmentation. Lots of different instruments, scarce in the bridge of the ship among different displays, and a lot of information that the officer needs to take under consideration to make a safe decision. So this creates an inefficient support issue. Basically, when the correct decision is based on the ability the captain and its navigation officer have to combine this information and make a safe decision. But most of all, the problem remains with one particular visualization instrument. The traditional nautical chart, which since its inception has never been changed format. It remained on the paper chart and it's still used today for navigation. This creates the following issues. All this digital information gathered from the digital navigation aids need to be transferred by hand on the nautical chart, which creates, which means which is a time-consuming process, prone to errors, and there requires an officer to be, during the approach into a restricted water area, requires an officer to be fully focused on top of the map and marking its SIP's position. So, with those problems in mind, came the information system navigation. And its prime actor is the electronic charge and display information system, or ECDIS. Basically what ECDIS does, some of its features is, it's meant to be an official paper chart replacement. IMO calls this concept as paperless bridge. Its prime feature is a constant real-time representation of the SIP's position on a digital chart. It allows for route planning and voyaging. It can act as an alert system. Basically, the officer can save counter depth counters and safety depth counters, and in case the ship start deviating from the predefined route, it's an alarm sound, and the officer can correct the ship's trajectory. But the most important thing, because it's already a digital format, it can actually overlay all the digital information gathered from other navigational aids already installed on board. That means radar information, GPS, gyro, NAVTEC for weather information. So it's not just a digital version of the paper map, it's actually a fully integrated decision support system for the sea. This is a typical, this is a basic ECDIS format, ECDIS architecture. So, as ENC is the electronic vector chart, which is issued by the IHO, the format is called S57. It's basically a predefined set of XML code which combines information about bathymetry, distances, graphics, any information that you can actually find on the paper map, it's being implemented into this ENC. And the updates part, which is not explained, is basically those ENCs have to be constantly updated with new information whenever the ship reaches approaches in a new area that has never been visited before. Those ENC charts need to be provided to the vessel. Nav sensors are basically GPS, VHF, all the instruments mentioned before that are designed to measure, determine position of the vessel. Gyro compass, also known as digital gyro, is actually the modern version of the traditional gyroscopic compass. And the reason we needed a digital one was to be able to implement it into the ECDIS system. The depth sounder, also known as echo sounder, is basically a sonar type device that constantly gives us the under keel clearance of our vessel. And weather level cards, those are all data that are provided through the NAVTEC. It's a device that gives information, provides all this information to the officers, so they can predict the circumstances in the area they're about to enter. And the automatic identification system, of course, and radar, and system electronavigational chart is the final database that's been resulted when all those measurements are being implemented into the initial ENC file. So in ENC file, they're all stored in a database which is comprised of those SENC files. And of course, the display is what the user.
What happens when they're inconsistent? I mean, last.
That's yeah. Well, that's actually a very good question. There are various techniques to actually cross-examine whether the satellite, for example, has some kind of delay,
Yes.
so the position doesn't match. Usually they overlay the radar, which the radar never has a deviation problem. So if those two images do not match, they usually adjust the satellite image according to the radar. And there are various other navigational techniques or defined into the ISM code. And all officers are required to know these techniques. I mean, officers, new officers at least. The new generation of officers. Or the Nintendo generation, as they actually, the old ones called the new ones. So, restricted water navigation. Where is it? So, it's all sound good. So, where is the problem exactly? The problem lies in the way ECDIS depicts this information, especially when we're talking about restricted waters, where we use very large scales. So, this is the image of how a restricted water area. I think I should do actually. Yeah, of how a restricted water area looks in the traditional paper chart. So, the white area is where the ship can sail safely, and the blue area is where the water starts to be the shallow waters begin, basically. Those little numbers you cannot see them here, but they're bathymetric measurements. So, this is what it looks like in the ECDIS screen. The depiction of the characteristics of the area are not as defined as it is here. There's a lot of information, a lot of bathymetric information is missing. So basically the officer needs to interrogate each point of the screen. And also there's a lot of new type of symbols, which new officers needs to relearn them. Also, when, as we said, we can overlay information from other nav systems. This is what happens if we overlay all the information within a restricted water area. This is basically creates confusion, and it's impossible to navigate usually. So a common phenomenon we see it was actually very common when I used to work in a shipping company. Lots of officers were falling back to the paper chart and basically disregarding ECDIS system completely because of this mess. So why this happens? Because there's a lot of information gathered in a very small area, which is caused by the large scales used within restricted waters. So also, as we talk about, there's a lot of new symbology, which is not directly clear. So what is this object here? It's like, is it a danger, is it a rock, is it a shipwreck? Unless the officer rolls the mouse and right-clicks on this object, he cannot know exactly what that means. This information was provided to him directly on the paper chart. So all this creates, on top of all that, there is a tendency to over-rely on it, especially from younger generation of mariners. I didn't mention for the Nintendo generation, I didn't say it by accident. They completely forget about the traditional navigation techniques and they focus strictly on technology. So, as you already said, if they're not aware of how to actually use the radar properly to fix their position, and they're focused on what ECDIS represents, they're going to cause an accident, because maybe a 30-40 meters deviation in the open ocean does not matter, but inside the restricted water area it can have catastrophic effects. So, what is the answer to that? Right now, the most prominent research is focused on the 3D representation of ECDIS data. And specifically, the title is Cartographic Three-Dimensional Visualization. So basically, they use the data extracted from the ENC charts and using computer-aided basically CAD models to recreate realistic visualizations of that data. So why do they do that? It's according to Goralski, it's a fast and accurate way of understanding the navigational situations, thus increasing awareness. It decreases mental overload and minimizes fatigue. It supports better decisions, and it reduces human errors, which is the main cause for accidents. So why 3 dimensions? Why something else? Well, basically, our minds are programmed in 3D. It's the most direct method of transmitting information. It's actually how the speed at which we perceive information from the environment has helped our species develop over the years and survive over the years. It's 3D connection. 3D world actually gives us a better area and situation awareness. 2-dimensional information is also susceptible to misinterpretation. We can see that by the fact that some people are more capable in interpreting a map and extrapolate it to their environment than other people. So, it's not something new actually. It's been used in 3-dimensional training it's actually not something new. 3D visualization has been used to train officers using EGDIS, using computer-aided simulated environments, and it's quite a profitable industry actually. Basically, why don't they train officers directly onto the EGDIS screen and they use 3D visualizations? Because, as we said, two-dimensional information is susceptible to misinterpretation. So they try to provide the officer with as realistic scenarios as possible. So there needs to be a distinction here. Cartographic versus photorealistic 3D visualization. Photorealistic is basically a realistic representation of the real world. It's what we know from computer games and from simulators. What it's aimed for is to recreate the situation and condition of the real world as closely as possible. But this has issues. We cannot perceive, through the simulator, the officer cannot perceive more than he can actually perceive in the real world. That means he cannot see more than he can actually see outside of the window or from the instrument he has in front of him. Hence, a limited situational awareness. The cartographic 3D visualization, on the other hand, is designed to enhance and facilitate the understanding of the situation, of the presented situation. It's designed to allow the user to tailor what information he wants to see on the screen and where he wants to see them. It's designed to transmit the specific information in the most direct way possible. Most important of all, it's been designed based on the traditional methods that the 2-dimensional paper chart has been conceived upon over the centuries and millennia. However, there are some inhibiting factors. So, if 3D visualization is all that good, why it hasn't been widely used for navigation? Why all the research that's been done so far on the 3D visualization of nautical charts hasn't moved past the research or prototype phases? So why it's not as